Night Echoes from Hemina is a strange bird. This is a band whose first three albums were excellent, and they're part of the budding Australian progressive music scene that has been going on for about a decade, but definitely seems to have spiced things up over the course of the past 5 years or so. We haven't heard from a band such as Carnival in a while, but Hemina has steadily been placing themselves right there as one of the forefront members of the new class of progressive metal greats. And with their fourth album, they plan to extend on that. This is a group that never seems to have gotten that big-time breakout moment that they've deserved. Does Night Echoes actually have that moment encased within this very, very thin-looking, digibook? Let's take a look. So this album starts off with The Only Way, which is a really cool opener. Not to mention, it's the one that has been co-written by Douglas Skeen as well as the bassist. And this is a really cool track based off of the atmosphere that you're able to get overall from this. The one thing that Night Echoes is really able to provide, and we'll be talking about this throughout the album, is a unique experience through progressive music history. So we'll have some songs that feel like they are incredibly original, but have been borrowing some elements here and there, or at least that you can subtly pick up on as you go. The Only Way has that triumph of a great opener that you can oftentimes hear on some progressive records, and it's a really nice way to open this one up. Moving on to What's the Catch, which was the original single that was provided. This is only 3 minutes and 24 seconds, which seems a little bit short for progressive metal or progressive rock, and it definitely has sort of that AOR feel. It's kind of anthemic at points, and I really enjoy that. Mostly because it shows that this band has the ability to take their songwriting and morph it, sort of have a metamorphosis right there in the middle of an album. It's not something that's going to be 100% geared toward one side. This is almost taking a little bit of a hard rock approach and adding a progressive touch to it. And doing that in that sort of AOR almost fashion provides a really catchy track that is able to transition nicely between two very, very big opening numbers. The second one being We Will. But We Will and One Shot really don't hold as big of a candle to a song such as Flat, which takes things and goes a little bit more in the emotional direction. And I like the lyricism and the overall way that this album is able to sort of juxtapose itself versus the ones that we have just heard. Like, for example, We Will has a moment near the end of it that has a very wall of sound, almost Devin Townsend sounding approach, whereas tracks such as One Short does not quite have that same element. I like the fact that Flat is one that takes things a little bit differently and adds a little bit of an element that becomes a big portion of the second half of this album, and it's this very, very emotional approach. Because we hear this in Everything Unsaid. This is a very quick 1 minute and a half long track that mentions the fact that there is a photo up on the fireplace wall or the fireplace lip that shows a family that is, together, and it sounds like they're happy. And this goes into the next track, which is entitled Nostalgia. Now, whenever I listen to Nostalgia, I hear so many different waves and so many different parts of progressive music history throughout this. I hear the common, the current that is right there within, that shows that unique Hemina approach, but then I'm also reminded of band names such as Wolverine as I think of a track such as Leaving Yesterday later on in this album. But at the same time, it also takes me all the way back to the 1980s and 1990s with bands such as Marillion and especially the band Enchant. And I like the way that this sort of has an enchanting feel to it without the nostalgia track itself being placed there just to make you feel nostalgic. It's not something that's trying to aim to copy-paste generations. Instead, it's just something that happens whenever the whole song comes together and fits right within the construct of the album that has thus far preceded it. And it's something that In Technicolor is able to show on an even grander scheme. Through 9.5 minutes, this track is able to be its own song and be its own person. And as a result, like That Noise, it's very surprising. It's something that we've known that Hemina has been able to do throughout the course of their first 3 albums. And it was something that up to this point was strangely absent on Night Echoes, instead focusing for a smaller degree of, progressive metal experience with each and every track. This is the longest song on the album by a country mile, and it nearly is its finale. The finale actually belonging to Flicker, which features a slide guitar and some great vocals from folks that are not named Douglas Skeen. It's fantastic. And I like the fact that this song is able to go in a different direction with its conclusion. However, it does kind of just kill itself. It kind of just fades off. It's just done. And then the album itself is done. Whenever you listen to this track and hear its fade, you think that something is maybe going to sprout out behind it and continue the track on for another couple of minutes. But it doesn't happen. And at first that's really off-putting, but then whenever you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. A flicker is not something that's meant to last. It's instead something that's meant to be there and then disappear. And that's exactly what this song was able to do with its closing moments. Night Echoes is an interesting beast, even after you listen to it a couple of times. This is one where if you try it just to compare it to their previous 3 records, you're going to be met with the roadblock of it being very different than those records. So it's kind of hard to compare and contrast. But for what it's worth and its merit, it's still a very strong disc. I feel that this is one that is going to be like a lot of other, 4th or 5th albums after a string of positive ones that many bands have encountered throughout the years. I'm looking especially at groups such as the aforementioned Marillion, who had great and, very well-received albums throughout the first part of the 1980s, but then by the time he made it to This Strange Engine in 1995, there was only the diehards that really knew about this band and really cared about this album. Which, by the way, is a really good album. You should probably check it out. But then think of various other groups that have had these types of things happen, where they start off really hot, and then maybe a long gap is ensued, and the next album that comes doesn't have as much fanfare, or seems like it's this hidden gem that should have been, embraced by all. I feel that Night Echoes right now is about a 21 out of 30. And it's one that perhaps with age, or in 5 to 10 years, we're going to look back on and say, wow, this was a real transition point for this band. Either that or, wow, this is a subtle work of genius that really shows the dynamisty and the overall scope of the songwriting structure that Hemina is able to provide. I don't think we're going to be looking at this as the weak one. I instead think this is going to be one that has its merit, and we need just a greater sample size in order to fully appreciate it. It's kind of a confounding album, but I like it. I like it a lot, especially considering the historical overtones I capture from it, from prog history. What did you think about Night Echoes by Hemina? Have you ever even heard of this band? If you haven't, scope out their Bandcamp, which is featured in the description box below. My name is coverkillernation, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.